All right, well, good day, daily Bible readers. I want to encourage you to keep up your daily Bible reading, and it's been encouraging as I've been interacting with other people in our small group and in some other venues where people would mention, I've been reading this in the Old Testament, and so we still are maintaining some of that momentum from our class that we had on Sunday morning. We want to keep that going, and as I've reminded you throughout this whole process, if you get behind, we'll just pick back up. We're starting Judges. Today are actually continuing Judges, and so you can just pick up in Judges. Also posted on RightNow Media on our Facebook page. There's a J.D. Greer, well-known author, preacher, conference speaker, has a series on Judges that would be very helpful as we take Judges and try to apply it to our life and our situation. And then those little videos, the cartoon videos that I've shown in class, how to read through that particular book. So I posted one of those for Judges as well. So if you want some more information on Judges, some personal study, then check out Park Avenue's Facebook page, or just get on RightNow Media and search for Judges, or drop me an email, and I'll let you know a couple that I would recommend. There's so much on RightNow Media. So, but again, keep up the good work. All right, today in our Old Testament reading, we'll be continuing Judges, chapter 6, verse 1, and we'll go through 16:31. And with me today is Calvin Henry. And so Calvin's going to be with us through the month of May. We still don't know when we're going to be back together. And even when we get back together, Calvin, we don't know if we're going to be able to have Bible class at 9 o'clock. So we may be continuing this through May, and I'm so glad that Calvin has agreed to be with us as we talk through our Bible reading. So I'll hand it over to Calvin.
Appreciate it, Todd. I'm glad you asked me to do this because you forced me to get caught up on my Bible reading.
There you go.
Yeah.
So if you fall behind, watch out. I may call you to be here.
I was running a little behind, but I had to get caught up.
Well, doing this has really helped me, motivate me to keep pace with the readings as well.
Well, I noticed last week's study, you finished up through Joshua chapter 5, and chapter 6 starts with a verse that is just very typical of the book of Judges.
Yeah.
Chapter 6, verse 1 says, "Again the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years he gave them into the hands of the Midianites." Again, the Israelites did evil in the sight of the Lord.
Yep.
That is just a recurring theme throughout the book of Judges. We find them just incapable of staying faithful for very long, it seems like.
Not at all. Yeah.
And so we are going to continue on with chapter 6 and through 16 of the book of Judges this morning.
Interesting stories. I mean, especially if you're not familiar with these stories, just really action-packed, a lot of drama, just about everything that is necessary for a good story. Not good stories necessarily in the sense of good people or good things happening, but very interesting stories.
Okay, it says the power of Midian was so oppressive in verse 2 that the Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in the mountain clefts and caves and strongholds. That's kind of sad to think that they had been given the land, but they can't live in it now because they have been evil. The Lord has punished them with with these Midianites, and the Midianites are so powerful that the Israelites are having to hide out in the caves, and very sad situation. And verse 6 says that Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help. So,
and that's another recurring theme, crying out to the Lord for help. Yeah.
So we find that 7 years they had after 7 years of oppression, they were able to get relief from the Lord. And that relief comes through the person of Gideon, whom the Lord chose to be their next judge or next leader. In verse 12, it talks about how an angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon and says to him, "The Lord is with you, you mighty warrior." I bet Gideon wondered who the angel was talking to.
Who are you talking to
when he said, "You mighty warrior."
Yeah.
sometimes we're capable of things that we don't know we're capable of. Gideon did not know he was a mighty warrior, but we'll find out as we read through these chapters that he really was.
Yeah, a lot of these military leaders, he's just out there, what is he, threshing wheat. I mean, these guys aren't necessarily trained as generals, military people.
Of course, the Gideon has some questions for the Lord too. He says, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us?
Yeah.
And I expect that's the question that some of us might be asking right now, or different points in our lives. I believe the Lord is promised to be with me, but where is He right now?
Yeah.
I don't see Him. I don't feel Him. Why are all these things happening to us? A very good question that we don't always find the answer to when we want it.
No, one thing, when I saw that question, I agree with you. We don't know the answer to this, but in one sense, I'm thinking, Gideon, you should know why this is happening. You guys have not been obedient to the Lord, and it really revealed, not just in Gideon, but I think in that whole culture, how oblivious they were to their own disobedience and how they had forgotten. And I know this is a theme that we've seen throughout Deuteronomy, Joshua, and now Judges, how they had forgotten that God's covenant was based on their obedience. And so I underline that. I think, why has all this happened to us? And I'm thinking, Gideon, can't you figure this out?
Okay.
I mean, you guys have not been faithful. And that's not always the answer. I know that's not always the answer, but sometimes...
No,
I know my life.
Often it is. Often it is.
Yeah.
We don't, and it takes some shaking up in our lives for us to realize it.
Yeah.
And that is what the Lord did to Israel lots of times. In verse 15, the Lord said, or Gideon asked the Lord, "How can I save Israel?" Okay. How can I save Israel? The Lord said, "I'm sending you." He said, "How can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I'm the weakest in my family." It sounds a little bit like Moses when God called on him to lead the people out of Egypt. You got the wrong man.
Right.
I'm a nobody. Why do you think I can do this? But the Lord said in verse 16, "I'll be with you and will strike down the Midianites as if they were but one man." So the answer is not in Gideon's power. The answer is in God's power and His promise to be with him. In verses 25 through 32, we find a story there of how the Lord gives Gideon a commandment, and that is to destroy his father's altar to Baal, the Canaanite god, and also to cut down the Asherah pole. And if you read different translations and different commentaries, you get different ideas about what that Asherah pole was all about. Some say it represented the goddess, and some say it just marked out their sacred area of worship. But in any case, it was related directly to the worship of false gods. And God said, cut that down, build a proper altar to the Lord, and use the wood from that pole to burn a bull as a burnt offering.
Right, and this is his father's idol. So this is kind of in his own backyard.
It's his father's, and it's also, what all the people around are worshiping, and so he said, "Okay, I'll do it," but he decides not to do it in the daytime.
Right.
He's going to do it at night.
He's going to go under the cover of darkness there.
So he does it at night, and he obeys. And the next day, the people see what's happened, and they say, "Who did this?" And
not "Who did this?" Yay! Who did this? We're going to kill him. Yeah. And so this again reveals the attitude of the people. Oh no! Someone has destroyed our false gods. And so the people are really, at this point, it paints a picture of the religious culture right there, that they are steeped in this worship of the Baals and the Asherahs and the other Canaanite gods. Yeah, they get real angry. They're about ready to kill someone.
Then someone who'd seen what happened or knew what happened, they investigated, and they said Gideon, the son of Joash, did this. And they came out and demanded of Gideon's father that he turn him over, bring out your son, he must die. Joash replied, and it was his altar, but it's also his son.
Right.
And so he says, why are you going to plead Baal's cause?
Yeah.
Are you trying to save him? Whoever fights for him shall be put to death by morning. If Baal really is a god, he can defend himself. So Gideon's father, though guilty of worshiping Baal himself, now takes Gideon's defense and says, after all, Gideon wasn't able to do this if Baal had any power.
Right. So, if this is a god, can he take care of himself? Right. So Gideon's father does kind of step up at this point, but it's the son who kind of leads the father into obedience, which is interesting.
Yes. Okay. Verses 33 through 35, the Midianites and other nearby nations or peoples prepare to attack. Gideon summons the nearby tribes to follow him in the battle, the ones that are right in his area, the tribes of Israel that are in his area. And then in verses 36 through 40, after Gideon has accepted the challenge and after he's called these people to battle, it says that he decides he's going to ask the Lord again to show him a sign. So in verses 36 through 40, we find that he asked for that fleece.
The fleece, put the fleece out before God.
For the dew to dampen just it and not anything else, or vice versa. And two different tests. Todd, it seems strange to me that when he's gone this far, now he decides he wants to test the Lord and ask if is this really your will? Why do you think he would do it when he's this far along with the plan?
Well, first of all, I'm just really surprised that God just doesn't get mad at him and just say, forget it, we'll start with someone else, And so, kudos to God here that he has patience. But one thing, the tearing down of the Baal and the Asherah pole didn't get a really good reception.
No.
And so, he may still be wondering, does he want to take that leap? Does he want to take that risk? Does he want to give into full obedience? Because it almost cost him his life the first time he obeyed. And so there's some hesitancy. And again, it really shows in this particular case that God is very patient with Gideon. I don't think this is necessarily a model that we should use. I'm not saying that, but I think it does reveal that God has patience with Gideon. He understands his hesitation, willing to work with him through his doubts, through his fears, and bring him to a point where he really has that faith, because he's going to need that faith. And I think it's real interesting, just like Gideon tested God, God's going to come back and test Gideon. You got too many men. We're going to read that in just a minute. And so that may be a factor. Things didn't go too well the first time around. Obviously, his father wasn't the best example, and so he didn't have that upbringing. He was obviously familiar with the stories, because he does in that initial dialogue with God. You brought us through Egypt, but how that was reinforced in the home is questionable. He was from a small tribe, and he just felt a little bit inadequate for the task. So I
think we all have moments like that.
I may have done the same thing.
We all have moments like that. We've got these big plans that we say, this is what the Lord wants me to do, and then when it comes time to do it, Lord, is this really what you want me to do?
So I got to balance this in my life, because sometimes I think, all right, God, if you really want me to do this, then send me some sign.
Right.
And honestly, I've done that, and sometimes God responds.
Okay.
But I think a danger, I guess, in this story is to delay obedience until we wait for some extraordinary sign. If you know what is right to do, then we need to do it. And so we can't put off obeying God because He doesn't do something like this.
Good point.
But then balance that. God, when we're really struggling, God, give me some type of confirmation. Maybe it's peace, a peace of mind. Maybe there's someone else who just calls me a mighty warrior that I never saw in myself. And so, struggle for all Christians. How do we really determine the will of God in our lives? And so this is certainly in that discussion. Gideon's story is part of that discussion.
Okay.
But God sticks with him. I'm really grateful for that.
Okay. Well, we're going to rush along a little bit through Judges because we have several chapters to cover and not a whole lot of time. But in chapter 7, we have that story that I think all of us learned in Sunday school. And how that Gideon calls together his army from these tribes and is ready to go to battle. And the Lord says, wait a minute, you got too many people. He started off with 32,000. The Lord said, well, you don't need that many. If you win with this many, you'll say, well, we did it. Let's send some of them home. Let all of them who say that they're afraid and want to go home, let them go home. And so 22,000 left. That left just 10,000. And the Lord said, that's still too many. And so we're going to give them a test. And after the test of how they drank, if they got down and drank like a dog, or drank the water out of the stream without being on guard, or if they were careful, that test left only 300.
300 men.
And I expect Gideon was wondering what in the world is going on. The Midianites are powerful, and the Lord just leaving me 300 men. But he continues, and he's faithful, and then the rest of the chapter describes how that battle began, and that they put the people to running, the Midianites, camp, which was tremendously large. They just ran away whenever they heard those pitchers shatter, those trumpets sound.
Really didn't even have to fight.
Shout, and saw those torches all around on the mountainside. Of course, they probably thought there were 50,000 of them up there when there was just 300. But so they ran away, and then a battle ensues with others helping as Gideon calls them in to chase them down and be sure they don't all get away. In chapter 8, it tells us that Gideon killed the two kings that he had captured, Zebah and Zalmunna. The reason he did that is because they had killed his own brothers. And then Gideon asked the Israelites to give him an earring from the plunder. And they each gave him a golden earring. And they made out of that a golden ephod, which was similar to what the priests wore. And it became an object of worship for the people. And it says that it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. He didn't ask for much, just one earring from each man. That's quite a lot, though, when you add it all up. It was several, I think 40-something pounds of gold. And but he made that ephod. Seems innocent enough, but they began to worship it.
Yeah, this is going to happen. I seem to remember a story of the snake, the bronze serpent. This is the bronze serpent. I guess they've carried that along, and I think at the time of the kings, the bronze serpent is going to become an object of idolatrous worship as well. So,
thanks to Gideon, the people did enjoy victory. They had peace for 40 years. And then it tells us at the end of chapter 8 that the Gideon had 70 sons from his wives. He had apparently several wives. And it says also that he had one son from a concubine, and his name was Abimelech. And we'll find out more about him later.
Plays into the story.
It says there in verse 33 of chapter 8, no sooner had Gideon died than the Israelites again prostituted themselves to the Baals.
Yeah.
No sooner had Gideon died than the Israelites again prostituted themselves to the Baals. How in the world is that possible?
I know. It's like these, not even in the ground yet, the people are falling back into their old behavior. But of course, this is one of the themes of the book of Judges, is this cycle that they go through and how quickly they forget. And that's been their nemesis throughout all of this time, is that they don't remember what God has done for them, and they don't remember the covenant. So how does that happen? Gideon was a mighty warrior, and Gideon did some great things. But I didn't see a lot of any religious reform, or that didn't seem to, it seemed like he may have stopped a little short. He kind of removed the evil influence, but did he really replace it with what God wanted? And if we can take things out of our lives, but if we don't replace them with something that's good, then evil has a way of creeping its way back into our lives really quickly. And so maybe that was one of the weaknesses of Gideon, is that he didn't fill that void with the spiritual instruction that he needed to fill. Looking at his family life, many wives, concubines, and so I don't want to trash Gideon at all, but there was some moral failings in his life, it seems, as well.
There's some breakdown in the people too. Right?
Yeah, and then the golden ephod. I'm not sure exactly what his motivation was, right, and how he couldn't see that coming. Maybe he didn't anticipate what could have happened when he did that. So. Basically, ultimately, it comes down to the people not remembering. Are the people gathered together, and is the covenant restored? I don't see that in this reading. Maybe I missed it, but he's not really, hey, remember who we are, remember who we're supposed to be. Let's go back over the covenant that was established with Moses. He doesn't really call them to that. So we may have just stopped a little short, and we could do that in our own lives as well. I'm going to give this up, I'm going to give that up, but we don't implement spiritual disciplines. We don't implement service. We don't implement good in our life. I don't know. I'm not sure what you're thinking there, but
I don't know either. I just know it seems amazing that they would forget so quickly.
Right.
Yeah. In chapter 9 talks about Abimelech, that one son of his concubine that was obviously a shrewd fellow. A tough guy,
scoundrel. Really,
I guess he was forced to be tough from his youth, because his other brothers had thrown him out. They didn't want him to inherit with them, and he goes though to these 70 half brothers.
Yeah.
And says, after Gideon's death, now, would it be better for our people to have just one ruler or have 70 rulers? Mm-hmm. Well, just one would be better. Well, okay. So they ended up, he convinces them that he's the one to be the ruler. Yeah. All the citizens of Shechem were inclined to follow Abimelech, for he is our brother. So we find that he was not a particularly good leader. The youngest son out of the 70 brothers, named Jotham, cast a curse upon him and on the people of Shechem that allowed him to be named their leader, their king. He says that to name him as the king over our people is like the forest naming a thorn bush to be king over the trees.
Yeah, interesting parable there, wasn't it? Yeah.
And so he didn't have too high opinion of Abimelech.
No.
And he ran off and hid after he pronounced
he goes
that.
into hiding. Yeah. Witness protection program for, was it Jotham, is that his name?
Yes,
the one surviving son?
Yeah, the youngest son, And he was the only surviving son, you just mentioned, because of Abimelech's first action after getting power was to kill the 70.
Yeah, that's right. That's one way to remove your rivals.
Kill
them
the
all,
70 that elected him,
We think politics are bad now, huh?
That was sad. But we find out that Abimelech comes to kind of a bad end because of in his violence. He's always at odds with somebody, and he attacked a city, Thebes, to besiege it and to capture it. And while he's doing that, a woman throws a millstone off the roof. It lands on his head and kills him. But just before he dies, he's also a proud man.
Right.
And says, "Oh, don't let him say a woman killed me. Go ahead and run me through."
Right.
So he died a violent death as he lived a violent life. And the curse of Jotham on Abimelech and the people of Shechem was fulfilled. In chapters 10 and 11, we have some lesser known judges,
some minor judges,
barely mentioned. Although they reigned for several years in some cases. Tola was 23 years.
Yeah, no stories though.
Jair, 22 years. They must not have had any really interesting Gideon type stories to tell. But for some reason they're mentioned, but not much. And then comes Jephthah. Before Jephthah, it says that Israel had been unfaithful again. They were serving Baal and the Ashtaroth and the gods of Syria and Sidon and Moab and the gods of the Ammonites. And it said God allowed the Philistines and the Ammonites to dominate them for 18 years. And then along comes Jephthah. Okay. Now Jephthah was the son of a prostitute. And actually, it was his brothers that ran him off. In Abimelech's case, he probably never lived with his brothers. But his brothers ran him off. But then when the situation was so bad and they needed a leader, they came to him and said, "Won't you be our leader? Won't you be our ruler?" And they said, "Well, you didn't want me before. Well, we want you now." So they took him to be the leader, because he was a mighty warrior. The king of the Ammonites claimed that the Israelites had wronged them by taking their land.
Why are you picking on me?
Why'd you take our land? And Jephthah answers, "Well, if you remember back when,
a little history lesson,
when our people were coming through here, all we asked was permission to pass through peacefully, and you wouldn't give it to us, and so the Lord gave you over into our hands."
What goes around
so
comes
the Lord
around.
gave us this land, and we're not giving it back, basically. Okay. The Ammonite king was not too convinced by that argument, and they decided to go to war against them. When Jephthah was about to attack the Ammonites, he made a vow. Said, "Lord, if you just let us have the victory, I'll sacrifice to the Lord whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I get home."
Right.
And unfortunately, he regrets that vow. You tell us why?
Well, he gets back home. The first thing to come out of the house is his daughter, and so he's made this vow he's going to sacrifice, and he keeps this vow. Now, there is some debate as to exactly what Jephthah did. Did he actually sacrifice her, or was this a vow for her perpetual virginity? Because how it all works out in the end, she's kind of grieving the fact that she's not going to be married, have children, and things like that. But I don't think it's unreasonable for us to believe that he actually kept that vow of sacrificing his daughter. I'm not sure. Again, you'll see different views on that. So a couple of things here. It shows the importance of vows in the Jewish mind. And we see this throughout Scripture. We see this in the law. If you make a vow then you need to keep it. And so what must be going through his mind is, I know that this is bad to sacrifice my daughter, no matter how that plays out. I know that's not good, but it is even more serious for me not to keep my vow. That's how strong that thinking was in the Jewish culture. And it comes from the law. I mean, God is really, he has taught this through the law, that if we want a society that's able to operate, we need to have people who do what they say and don't go back on their vows. And so I don't know if he wasn't thinking.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's thoughts that part of this Canaanite religion did involve child sacrifice. And so was he influenced by that at all? I don't know. But this is just a terrible mistake. And so really, the lesson I get from this is, don't make a promise, don't make a vow unless you are really serious about it.
Right. I'm sure he had no idea that was what was going to happen. That's who's going to come out of the house to meet him.
Yeah.
Maybe
it's
he's
amazing.
expecting a pet lamb or something.
Yeah, but his daughter doesn't even protest.
Right.
And that's the amazing thing. Oh yeah, I get it, Dad. Yeah. Jephthah's daughter doesn't get a lot of credit, but she's all right. You got to be a man of your word, and so kudos to Jephthah's daughter there. Yeah. But again, a warning: let your yes be yes and your no be no. Jesus says. So be people of your word, but think before you make a vow.
Two good lessons. Okay, chapter 12. Jephthah had led his people to victory, but then the men of Ephraim came and were mad at Jephthah. Mm-hmm. It says, "Why did you go to fight the Ammonites without calling us to go with you?" Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to burn down your house over your head. They wanted credit, and they may have wanted some of the plunder. They're proud people, and say, why didn't you let us go fight with you?
See some infighting among the tribes of Israel.
And Jephthah says in verse 2, I and my people were engaged in a great struggle with Ammonites, and although I called, you didn't save me out of their hands. So don't say I didn't ask for your help. You just didn't give it until you just offered it after you saw the battle was already won. Yeah. That didn't make them very happy, and there was a battle between the people of Jephthah and Gilead, the Gileadites, and against the Ephraimites. And Ephraim was totally overrun. They had 42,000 people, men that were killed at that time. Amazing. I mean, that's just an amazing number that went to death, simply because they were angry with their brethren who didn't invite them to be part of the war. Yeah.
So they're killing
themselves.
That
shows they weren't very good soldiers, huh?
We didn't invite you because we just whooped you. Yeah.
But beyond, also the interesting story there is the story about when the people from Ephraim tried to cross over the river. Right. They had a password they had to give. Yeah. Can you pronounce Shibboleth? Shibboleth.
Yeah.
Okay, you're not one of us. You're from Ephraim.
Right.
So
just
we need to learn to pronounce the words well.
Just a little difference in the dialect. So that would be.
Yes, different dialect. Jephthah, even though we have quite a bit here about Jephthah, says he only led Israel for 6 years.
Yeah, I'm surprised I saw that. It was
we squeezed a lot there in 6 years.
Yeah.
Okay. After that, some others are mentioned: Ibzan, Elon, Abdon, etc. No major events connected to them.
I didn't count up the total number of judges. I should have done that, but I did look up the time period. It's about a 350-year period that the judges cover. So it's a pretty prolonged period of the history of Israel.
It is a very long time. Yeah. I mean, think about it, a lot longer than what our country's been in existence.
Longer than we've been around.
And some of them ruled. I say reigned. They didn't reign, but some of them led for up to 40 years, and some of them only a few months or a few years. So there were a lot of them. Okay. starting in chapter 13, we have the story of Samson. Okay,
one of the
13 through
most
17
famous and notorious mighty warriors of the Old Testament. Yeah.
And these stories are pretty well known, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on them.
Yeah.
But we'll have to mention them because they're all interesting, and we've got some things to learn from Samson. First verse is good. Chapter 13, verse 1 says, "Again the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, so the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Another 40 years.
Yeah.
Another 40 years. And it's during that time that the Lord chose a certain couple to have a baby who was going to be his next judge. The angel of the Lord appeared to the woman. We don't have her name. The man's name was Manoah. The angel of the Lord appears to her. She was childless. He said, "You're going to conceive and have a son. Can't drink any wine or fermented drink, and can't have a razor pass over his head because he's going to be a Nazirite."
A Nazirite vow.
And so some people get Nazirites and Nazarenes mixed up.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and they're nothing to do with each other. But I read a book one time that was trying to defend some weird doctrines that confused Nazirites and Nazarenes.
Right.
But the Nazirite vow was to dedicate themselves wholly over to the Lord, and part of their commitment was not to drink any fermented drink or anything from the fruit of the vine, and the other part was not to cut their hair. So those were two of the things that went along with this vow.
And I think it could have been a lifelong vow, or some people took it for a period of time. It wasn't necessarily a lifelong vow.
I do know they had vows that were shorter term, at least when we get to the New Testament. The time of their vow was up and they were able to cut their hair or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that was exactly the same. Myself, it may have also been called Nazirite vow, but I'm not sure. In chapter 13, we find that a very interesting verse in verse 8 where we find a great prayer. Manoah prayed to the Lord, "O Lord, I beg you, let the man of God who sent you to us come again and teach us how to bring up the boy who's to be born." Wouldn't it be great if all parents prayed that prayer?
That's a good prayer of dedication.
Lord, teach us how to raise up our child. So they were good people, Manoah and his wife. And they wanted to do the Lord's will, and they wanted to raise him up the way the Lord wanted. Okay. So they had that experience with those appearances of the angel of the Lord to them, and then later Samson is born. She gave the birth to a boy, named him Samson. He grew, and the Lord blessed him. It says, "And the Spirit of the Lord," verse 25, "the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him while he was in a certain place."
Yes.
Okay.
The Spirit of the Lord, I noticed that in Gideon and with Jephthah, where the Spirit of the Lord comes on these three judges especially.
So he was born directly as a result of the Lord's will, and the Lord has a purpose for him, and at a certain age, the Spirit of the Lord begins to move within him. Unfortunately, when we get to chapter 14, we find out that's not the only thing that was beginning to move within him. We see that
have an eye for the women there.
He's reached an age where, he says, I kind of like the girls. And he saw a young woman in a town called Timnah, of the Philistine town, and he liked her. And he said, I've seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. Okay, just tell your parents, okay, that's the one I want. Go get her for me.
Let's go make a deal.
So they didn't like that at all. They say, couldn't you find a good Philistine woman to be your wife? Why do you have? A good Israelite woman to be your wife? Why do you have to marry into these uncircumcised Philistines. We don't want to have anything.
Which is godless, essentially a synonym for godless, heathen.
So anyway, do you think that they were right in opposing that marriage?
Well, I can't argue with them.
Yeah.
You know, they seem to be people who were dedicated to the Lord, wanted, as you mentioned, wanted to raise Samson in the right way, and were seeking wisdom for that. So this seems to be a very valid concern that they have. They want their child to be a good Jewish, God-fearing person, and we know how much it means to have a God-fearing partner along with that. So, I'm reading that and say, hey, mom and dad have given pretty good advice. But then there's a little twist in there, isn't there?
Yep, that's the problem.
Yeah. they didn't know what was going on behind the scenes, I guess.
Right. It says verse 4, his parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those situations in the Bible where we find that the Lord permitted or sometimes even caused some things to happen that we would think we wouldn't want to happen.
Right.
But He has a purpose that's bigger than the moment.
Yeah.
And he had a purpose in allowing Samson to be drawn to this Philistine woman. And the parents didn't understand that. And obviously they're trying to do what's right. The Lord's told them not to intermarry, and the Lord has told them to raise up their children respecting Him. And so they're trying to do that. But here the Lord makes an exception Himself because He has a purpose that He wants Samson to fulfill.
Yep.
Right.
A lot of enigmas in this story.
Yes.